And I cannot, 30th, sorry. Thank God I've got my producers in there who I'm actually sitting shouting at for not liking them people. So there you go. Joining us as our technology specialist on the phone right now, Kevin Curran. Hello.
Good afternoon, Philip.
Right, so our technology specialist, you are going to take us on a journey through the last 7 days of what's been going on. And the very first one that we're going to talk about is something that it's almost like apocalyptic when I read it. California startups bold plan to deliver sunlight on demand shocks customers. What about that?
Yes, a Californian company called Reflect Orbital. They aim to provide sunlight directly to one's location through an app. So again, at nighttime, it basically provides sunlight on demand, as if you'd order food from an app. They presented this idea at a space conference in London, and basically they built a website, they built a concept where you log into the website, you give them the GPS coordinates, and then they'll get you some sunlight after dark. Now, they've only tested the idea with a weather balloon, really, which is covered in mylar and which is used for insulation in spacecrafts and reflects back the beam again. But what their plan is really to have 370 miles above the Earth, to put 57 satellites into orbit again, and that these would beam back sunlight from these satellites, really, these mirrors again, which measure 33 feet by 33 feet, and they would beam back to a spot on the Earth again. And the main customer they see is for solar panel installations on the Earth again. That, of course, is sometimes when we need electricity the most is in the dark again. So by being able to reflect the sunlight from space down to these solar panels again on the Earth again, that they would be able to generate at least 30 minutes each time that the satellite passes over again, and it passes over twice a day.
So you're telling me, right, like I come from one of the rainiest places, like basically the bottom of the valleys of Tyrone, and I can just get on my phone, get on my app and just go, I'm not really feeling this mizzle today. I might get a wee bit of sunshine on the go and just beam it in and there we go.
Yeah, but if you're not getting sunshine in your area, the clouds would be in the way anyway, so the satellite won't really help. It's more nighttime. Again, maybe you could bring down rain on your enemies or a fire on your enemies.
Oh, yeah.
You could turn it on and you could light up your enemy's house.
That's what I'm talking about. I want to rain down fire on my enemies. We're talking my language.
It's about turning, spots on the Earth to bring sunshine during the night. But of course, it has been tried before by the Russians. About 40 years ago, they launched a satellite briefly, and then they brought it back down to Earth crashing. But
they'd be up to no good with it.
Again, one of the enablers for this is that they've seen that the cost of launching satellites into orbit is coming down exponentially. Really, it's becoming cheaper and cheaper. So now that they believe it's feasible, whereas years ago it would have cost a small fortune to launch anything again. And we have a lot of satellites in space. People may not be aware, but there's just under 7,000 SpaceX satellites which are beaming down, broadband really to the Earth again. So, and that's only one company again which have the most satellites again. But there's a lot of satellites up there at the moment.
Now, this story, it sounds like something straight out of a James Bond villain, because obviously they're talking about the story as in like a good thing, going, we can bring sunlight on demand, but it also makes it sound like, we can take away the sunlight too. Do you know what I mean? But there's no greater terror in the world than being on a train without Wi-Fi, am I right?
It is. There's been a survey done by the Transport Focus, and they found that, whereas people were mostly satisfied up to around 85% with train services in the UK, but it was down to just about 50. It was a 35 percentage points lower for Wi-Fi, and in fact, only about 4.3% of people use train Wi-Fi at all. And I found that myself, that it's pretty useless here in the UK, and it's here in the UK. So basically people are just really dissatisfied with Wi-Fi on the train. And of course, we know the answer technically, that basically the train, what it actually has is maybe a number of SIM cards for each of the mobile networks, really, and then they become the hub you're connecting to. But the train itself is simply relying on 4G, 5G when you can get a 3G again. So it's really just got SIM cards, in one of the carriages, really. And it's not helped either by the actual material in the trains again, that if you were to design something which would stop Wi-Fi signals, a train carriage would be it again. That the welded aluminium creates what we call a Faraday cage again, which stops the Wi-Fi signal getting through. And of course, it all comes down to location as well. And urban areas are not bad. You generally have a lot more mobile masks, but when you're in rural areas, again, you're out in the country, it's quite difficult to get a signal. And also then the more people on the train, if they're trying to connect to Wi-Fi, the contention ratio is very, very high. Anecdotally, again, just...
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Like when you're sitting, in a train. Like when I lived in England, I found that the Wi-Fi was very different for each different provider. Obviously, like the trains are privatized, so like you'd have sort of better versions of trains than others, and I always thought they did a little bit better. But also, like, I mean, if you're going on a train and you think you're going to be able to download the whole director's cut of Lord of the Rings onto your phone, like you might be thinking that's probably the wrong place to do it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like anecdotally, I've used the Curran to Derry train quite a lot last year, and I found it just. But again, it makes sense because it's using a mobile SIM card. Maybe sometimes it's on a different network. I don't know what network they're using, but generally, whenever my Wi-Fi goes down or whenever my mobile connection is lost to my phone, it's also lost in the train as well. And there's many black spots again, and they never seem to get fixed. It's always the same black spots again, even in towns.
But that's it.
But again, there is one solution again, which is SpaceX again, which is those satellites again, which are really taken off again, and that gives you broadband from space, and that's really, really improved and changed the game, because we've had satellites for years for communication again. So we know back in the 60s, whenever the satellites were launched, we could see live events for the first time ever in the United States, over here, and likewise. And we've had sky dishes on our walls for 30 years, right? But the problem with those is that they're geosynchronous satellites. They remain in the same spot above the Earth, and they move with the Earth's rotation. So they're always in the same place, and they beam down. But the problem is it's so far away, it's like half a second, what we call latency. So they're great for one-way communication. No problem. TV signals come to us 99% of the time perfectly. But if you try to communicate in real time again, you couldn't even think you're playing a computer game. The problem is the distance. Nothing gets over the speed of light. So therefore, that's why they're not used. The old-fashioned satellites were pretty useless for any communication or web surfing because of the latency, how far away they are, like 300 plus miles or 22,000 miles above. But but SpaceX brings down the satellites near the Earth. So what it does is, again, it brings them down lower, really, so that we don't have as far to go. We don't have thousands of miles to go. And that's why they become more interactive. And they actually are quite comparable to broadband in most areas, actually.
I mean, that's Elon Musk mentioned in this, and obviously a little bit of SpaceX in California. It's hard to get away from him. He is making things a lot easier, and life a lot harder for people as well. I don't think we'll get anything from SpaceX or actually we actually might because I want to talk about the AI created recipes hard to swallow. This is artificial intelligence, not artificial insemination, just to get that out of the way. The AI created recipes are hard to swallow.
Yeah, there's an owner of a pizza chain in the States called Dodo Pizza, and he asked ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence chatbot, to come up with a recipe, and came up with a recipe which he never would have thought about using, like Indian grilled paneer cheese, za'atar herbs, tahini sauce, and shawarma chicken. And he said the customers loved it, and that is something he never would have come up with himself. But the mix of flavors was surprisingly good, and a few other people have tried these things again. And
that doesn't sound like an AI bot. That sounds like a chef from Derry. Honest to God, I remember when I came over and brought over all the Radio 1 people here for the big weekend back in 2013, and they were all blown away by the fact that there was a place that was doing pizzas and Indian at the same time. So maybe this isn't an AI bot. Perhaps it's just a chef from Derry. Just putting it out there. I might be well wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. There's also danger early on in the chat GPT revolution where people were using it for all sorts of things. But one of the things they were using it for was recipes, and it was coming up with horrendous. It was things that it had found on joke sites, spoof sites. Like putting stones in your, literally putting stones inside a dish and everything else. And so that was quite dangerous. So don't always trust fully whenever it's artificial intelligence coming up. But there is one good use app. I mean, there's a lot of apps, but there are apps which will generate recipes or generate dishes, suggest dishes for you from whatever ingredients you give it or in your fridge. You can take a photo of your fridge or your larder and it'll come up with, especially fresh food, and it'll come up with recipes based on what the ingredients are, leftovers really. And some people swear by them. So that's not a bad idea to be able to use up your leftovers.
I mean, it sounds very, very helpful, but I fear that if I took a photo of my fridge, it would just come back, go and get a takeaway. We have one more story here that I'd like to talk about just before you go. The technological advances in agriculture and changing the face of farming. Well, what's going on there?
Yeah, there's a move called agri-tech, really. It's bringing technology into farming, which we've done for a long time ago. But one of the key things which farmers are loving is basically auto steering, really, and also very high precision location within fields again, where basically the tractors steer themselves. They're able to go over the same tram lines again. And the less your machinery goes over your land in different places, the more, obviously the more crops you can plant, and it also protects the soil as well. So they're finding that a lot of the driving is now being done automatically by tractors within fields, really, and just more precision. And of course, that they waste less seed and waste less fertilizer by doing this again. So they're not doubling up on things again. So that's one aspect again, is with the tractors being automatically guided as well. And then when it comes to the cows as well, the dairy farmers are using kind of health monitoring tags on the cows again, and they're able to see whether a cow is feeding properly and their activity, and if it's lying down too much, they're able to bring it in and maybe give it medicine as well. And of course that happy cow produces more milk yield as well. So of course dairy farms have used them for years. A lot of trackers on cows as well. And I was involved in a court case actually with a dairy farmer from Derry, and I felt so sad for him.
Is this the start of a joke, by the way?
No, it was 6 years ago that he had spent about £100,000 on technology that each cow wears a tag, and they're supposed to come into the milk parlour when it works properly. Yeah. And then they go to the feeder, and then it's able to tell which cow is being milked and how much yield comes from it. And of course, then they allocate the correct amount of feed to the cow according to how much they're given, and they have other factors as well. But this was mistaking cows, and it was causing a lot of problems. And of course, the German company who had developed this technology came over, and they were disputing there was any problems, and yet there clearly was. And but again, a lot of dairy farmers again use all this technology, of course, for many years again. But when it goes wrong, of course, it can be a nightmare to put right.
I grew up on a dairy farm now, like not my own. I used to get babysat when I was a child, next door neighbours, and it was dairy farm. They got in the AI. And everything you're saying there, I've experienced. Cows can be awful cheeky though. Like they could be swapping the tags just to get more feed. You never really know with this, Kevin. And on that bombshell, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
You're welcome, Philip.
Legend. Thank you so much. That was Kevin Curran, our tech specialist.